Hi there, I'm Savannah Mexto with Mannor Law Group, and I'm excited to welcome you to another webinar Wednesday with esteemed elder law and estate planning attorney, Robert Mannor. If your parents own real estate—
Are you having audio problems with anyone else?
I don't
We got it.
so. If you own real estate, today's webinar is for you. Nope, I think we're all good. Okay, we have actually joining with us today special guests Thomas Farrell, CEO and broker with Crown Real Estate Group, and Doug O'Neill with First Title and Escrow. They're joining Bob today to answer an important question that most of us will face one day, but many of us do not know the answer to. What happens to the house when mom and dad are gone? Now, before I pass the mic, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping details. First, even though Bob is an attorney, today's webinar will not give specific legal advice. If you have a question about your unique situation, we encourage you to contact our firm after the webinar. Next, if you do have a general question or something comes up during today's presentation, I do encourage you to use the question box. We will save time to review questions during the webinar. If for some reason we don't get to your question, we will contact you after the presentation. Also remember that today's presentation will be recorded and the replay will be sent out tomorrow so that you can share that with your family, friends, or anyone who you think could benefit from hearing this information. Now, why should you listen to what the folks at Mannor Law Group have to say? First, we're a nationally recognized and respected elder law and estate planning firm. All three of our attorneys are accredited by the Veterans Administration to assist veterans with claims and appeals. Attorney Bob Mannor is nationally board certified as an elder law attorney by the National Elder Law Foundation. He is honored in 2020 as both a super lawyer and a leading lawyer by those peer review lawyer rating organizations. Bob is currently on the executive board of the State Bar of Michigan Elder Law and Disability Rights Section and past president of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, Michigan chapter. Lastly, my personal favorite reason, Mannor Law Group has been honored by readers of our local paper as the best or favorite law firm for the last 8 years in a row. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Attorney Bob Mannor and special guests, Thomas Farrell and Doug O'Neill.
Thanks, Savannah. So thank you, Doug and Thomas, for joining us today. I know that we've worked together on some things in the past, and this is actually a really popular topic, and so I'm glad to be able to share your expertise with the folks that we work with here. So if you want to kind of just quickly give an introduction of yourselves too, and just kind of tell about Crown Realty and First Title, and just kind of do a quick introduction, and then we'll get into some of the topics here.
Hi, Tom Farrell, 20 years experience in the real estate world. I've gone through the ups and downs of different markets. One of the things that we're encountering now, more than ever, are exactly why we're here today, is to talk about what to do with your home, mom and dad, and how to handle that. So looking forward to having it done.
And then I don't know if we lost Doug or not, or if he can hear us. I think we're having some technical difficulties. I don't know if we lost Doug or not, or if he can hear us. I think we're having some technical difficulties. I don't know if we lost Doug or not, or if he can hear us. I think we're having some. All right. Well,
I'm here if you can hear me.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead.
I'm Doug O'Neill. I'm National Sales Manager for First Title, and looking forward to great to meet you and spend some time with you. And I work very closely with Tom, and look forward to answering any questions and being part of this webinar.
Great. Well, so let's go kind of with a right down the middle question, and so we're working with lots of folks that are either dealing with their parents' property or dealing with their own property because they're downsizing or they're moving into independent living or assisted living. But let's kind of break those down and see if there's any sort of differences depending on the circumstances that they're facing. And all of these can be very challenging because it's whenever there's sort of this change in life or change in circumstances, sometimes they're in a medical crisis, and sometimes there's just been a death in the family. But let's start off by talking about what if it does end up in court. Now, you guys know that we try to keep our clients out of probate court. But if they haven't gotten their ducks in a row ahead of time, and they didn't get their legal work done and everything set up ahead of time, then we might end up in probate. So can you talk a little bit about selling a house out of a probate matter?
Absolutely. The first thing is being teamed up with a law firm like you at Mannor Law, having all the ducks in a row, so that way we get you the value, we submit that in, we get you all the information you need to go through if there is a court proceeding or not. The other thing we'd like to do is we do a walkthrough. We want to talk about condition. A lot of times when we get into some of these homes, there's been some neglect with some basic things that can mean the difference of quite a bit of money. One of the major things we always try to do with a home is to validate that it's financeable. Not every house we go into, for an example, we went into a house yesterday, it was built 1900. Some of the wiring was old, and some of the other things that would go into these houses need some updating so it can be sold in a normal market. With the market the way it is right now, everybody's careful how much they put into a home, but everybody wants top dollar, and we want to help them get that. So it's kind of a team approach. What we do is make sure that, again, we make sure that everything's tidied up on the law side. We list the house. We do the market analysis. We do a walkthrough to make sure condition's proper. And we listen to the client's needs. A lot of times there's quite a bit of items in the house that need to be handled. A lot of antiques. This house that I was at yesterday, the whole house was full of antiques, and they need to do a sale. So we try to be a reference for that and introduce our clients to all sorts of different vendors or partners to where they can help them sell those. The other side of this portion of it is to make sure title work's done correctly. And this is one of the big things. This is a reason why it goes hand in hand with title. Why I've asked Doug too to be part of this is that a lot of times things get put in trust. Not everything was recorded properly. It was done, but back in the day, I guess practices were different than now, which is why I'm always thankful when, I always prefer Mannor Law when it comes to my clients, because I know it's going to be done. And if you don't use a good law firm or a good attorney that knows how to do this and do it well, it can create a nightmare on my end. And it makes it to where a situation that's not pleasant anyway for the customer, it just makes it worse. So with that, Doug, kind of share with them some of the things that you've ran across when we're doing a listing and we need title work and some of the things that we're encountering that need to be addressed as soon as possible when we know this is where we're going.
Absolutely. First and foremost, the probate's going to be expecting certain documents from us because obviously they're releasing this or working through this. So we work very closely with Bob, with the Mannor Group, or work with any court system to make sure these things are cleared and they're done exactly as they're required. Keep in mind, a title company is not going rogue. A title company does exactly what is expected of them and asked of them, whether it be a lender, whether it be a court. We have to do everything according to what their specifications are. So making sure things are clear, protecting the seller, protecting the buyer. These are all huge things, and Tom was talking about it, but back in 2008, 2009, this market was a train wreck, and there's problems all over the marketplace as far as things that were kicked down the road or weren't handled right. So it's very important that you work with somebody who is paying attention to detail, doing everything according to what's required to do, and to make sure everything is clean and everyone is protected through the transaction.
That's a really good point. So we always insist, I realize that in some parts of the country and even in Michigan to some level, people think they're going to go to a law office to close on the real estate. And we get those calls from time to time, and our insistence is, hey, we will be happy to look at the paperwork for you and give you advice and things like that, but the closing is going to be done by the title company, because we got to make sure that we're not going to complete a real estate closing without going through the title company. And maybe, I don't know if you have any anecdotes or any stories, Doug, I know that we do a lot of times, especially if the property's been in the family for years, and just things that the family didn't realize as far as easements or right-of-ways, or dad had deeded away 15 feet of the property, or especially more rural areas where if there's farmland in particular or other types of things where people just traded deeds back and forth and there's deeds everywhere and they don't always match up and the legal descriptions don't always match up and things like that. I don't know if you have any war stories that you could share with us.
Well,
Hey, Doug, we had one recently.
Tom's jumped in here. So it happens, happens quite frequently because it's called a chain of title. And it's called that because you have to go through all the previous owners to make sure everything was deeded correctly and was done. And a lot of times back a few years ago, everything was being quitclaim deeded. And so everything wasn't recorded or was recorded. And so Tom and I just had a transaction with this company anyways, where there was a break in, someone quitclaim deeded it, but they did not record it. So there was a break in chain. And so they weren't people that sold it, and then they refinanced it. Another title company refinanced it, and they weren't refinancing something they didn't even own according to records. Now we were able to go back, and this is what you call clearing title. We worked very hard at going back, finding the right people, getting it all cleaned up, so when the transaction moves forward, there's no more problems. Can you imagine buying a house and going to refinance it 3 years from now and finding out you can't refinance it because you're not really the legal owner of it because something wasn't done right previously? It happens, and people are in shock. Or Tom's getting ready to close the transaction and come to find out that the people that are selling it aren't really in title. It's a lot more. It happens a lot more than people think it does, and it's really rough sometimes on the title part because of they want us to be the legal part, and we have, my wife runs our escrow department, and she must say 25 times a week, we're not attorneys. We're not attorneys. We're not attorneys. We're not attorneys. That's why we look forward to working with you and your group, Mannor Law Group, because, we like to defer that because they want to put us in that situation. That's not us. We're just trying to get it cleared up, make sure it's all done so they can be insured moving forward.
I did a presentation. Go ahead, Tom.
Hey, I was going to say is that a lot of times people will just do a general review of city documents. They say, well, the tax bill comes to mom and dad's name, my name. It's in my name, and that just says who's paying the bill and where to mail the bill. As Doug mentioned, when you're dealing with that, dealing with properties that were owned by family, doing title work and getting that look-see at it means everything. Another deal we just had, and it goes back to what you mentioned, Bob, is I have a piece of vacant land, farmland in Monday Township, 30 acres. This was another one I counted on a title company, Doug, to help me with to find all the documents. It also involved trust. A lot of times people, when they think that it's in a trust, that everything's clean, well, again, not every attorney does things the same way. So there was some homework that needed to be done, and we needed some help on that. And, from title aspect, and we were able to get that done. But documents, mom and dad did this back 40 years ago, and when you're looking through it, it's hard to find these ones, and then to find them and record them. On that one, we got lucky. But with farmland, there was 150 acres. They split it into different parcels to different family members. It's always a good time when we see these.
I did a presentation a few weeks ago about discouraging people from doing the quitclaim deeds, and you've mentioned this, Doug, a few minutes ago about quitclaim deeds, but also ladybird deeds often can throw a monkey wrench in things too. And so, I was discouraging them from doing them because, and maybe Doug, you can talk about this a little bit. We see this at least once a week, often multiple times a week, where somebody attempted to do a quitclaim deed or a ladybird deed, but the words on the document are so important. And if you don't know precisely what that means to a lawyer or a judge or to a title company, then you better make sure that you're not doing this. And you're probably not going to do it the same way if you go to a lawyer. So people think that they're saving time or saving money by not going to a lawyer and doing this in a more formal manner, or going to a title company and doing it in a more formal manner. When they don't say whether it's owned by tenants in common or joint tenants or tenants of the entirety, or they don't say the ownership, or the different words, one or two words different can mean a completely different thing than what they expect that they're doing. I don't know if you can talk to that a little bit, Tom. Yeah.
It happens all the time again. I mean, again, they go on forums online and they think all of a sudden they can print off this forms line or copy and paste, and then they try to record something that comes back and gets them down the line. Again, if I could get $1 for every time someone says, wants us to give them legal advice, I could probably retire right now, not even do title insurance anymore, because that's the problem. They're trying to cut corners. And let me, as honestly as I can put, there's no such thing in real estate transaction as cutting corners, because that corner will catch up with you down the line, because that's the problem. It's worth the investment to do it right up front. It'll save you a lot of grief in the long run.
A phrase that I use a lot is, just because it looks simple doesn't mean that it is simple. When it comes to legal documents, in particular like deeds, the simpler it looks, the more complicated it probably is. And so you rarely see somebody trying to draft their own trust, but they'll try to draft their own deeds all the time. And the reality is that the trust looks complicated, but the goal is to make it simple. A deed looks simple, but it often makes things way more complicated and necessary because of the one word different, or how it's worded it can cause all kinds of impact. And frankly, you haven't thought through all the consequences, because people will sign a quitclaim deed with the idea that nothing ever is going to change, that everything that they might sign a quitclaim deed, for example, trying to add their kids' names to the deed, which is always a bad idea to add the kids' names to the deed. But they might do that with the idea that, the kids are all alive. Well, guess what? Some of them might not be alive by the time that you pass away. And so it creates all kinds of complications.
Well, that just happened. If we had a transaction like that. So that just exactly happened. They thought that was going to be, they never recorded it, but they died. So what do you do? I mean, now now you're back to probate again. You're right back to where you started from. So if they had done it right the first time, it would have been done.
What's your guys' experience with lost deeds? So that we know, you mentioned this, and that this was a more common practice 15, 20 years ago, sometimes even more recently than that, where lawyers would create a trust, they would create a deed, but then not file the deed. That has kind of fallen out of practice. There's very few lawyers that do that anymore, but that is something that some folks did, would be to create a trust with the intent that the house would go through the trust, prepare a deed that would make sure that the house would stay out of probate, but then not file that deed, and then come 20 years later when nobody can find that deed.
You want to take it down?
I don't know about Doug, but I've been running into that a lot lately. And, that's, again, the reason why we turned to you to be the expert to help us with that. It was, from what I'm being told by numerous people, that just was standard. They felt that they prepared the documents, they collected the fee, they gave it to you and expected you to record them. Whereas nowadays, especially with your firm, that it's a full service where they take care of that for you and send you a copy of it just so that you have it for your record. So, in my experience, that's becoming, I'm seeing that more as estate sales specifically has become, really this year it's been quite heavy. I don't know about you, Doug. What about you?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think a lot of it is because we're just, it's generational, and, everyone's getting older and things are happening, and, situations are going on. But the bottom line is that now you come to a title perspective and it hasn't been recorded, and now the parents have died. So now they may be a trustee according to the trust, but now they don't have any right to do it because there's 4 other siblings that have to sign off on this before anything happens. And so you just created a problem. Why not record it? If you're going to do it, why not record it? At least it's recorded. And so we're not causing problems, because we can't go back to mom because mom just passed away, unfortunately.
Yeah. So let's go on to this next slide. I don't know, we kind of talked about this a little bit, but are there anything, I know there's a couple specifics that I know about that make it interesting about dealing with a revocable trust in real estate, but anything that we haven't mentioned yet that you want to talk about, specifics that make it interesting as far as selling from a trust or maybe even refinancing from a trust and things like that?
You take on the refi, Doug.
What's that?
You handle the refi question.
Okay. Well, it's very, very important that the trust is very specific on who's going to be the trustee on it, because that's where the problems usually lie. We get a lot of requests for people saying because they were a child, they want to now sell a house, and then when you look into then when you ask for the trust, it's like pulling teeth. They don't even want to give you to it because in the trust there's not specifically laid out who can refinance it, who can do anything. So we're chasing it because it doesn't. So that's why it's very, very important to work with someone like Bob, who's in law group, because make it very specific who the trustee is. There may be 3 other siblings who are maybe entitled to it, may not be entitled. It needs to be. We're only going to follow the instructions of what the trust says. We're not making up rules. We don't make up rules from a title. We're an umpire. We are not calling balls. We call balls and strikes. We do not have a favorite in the transaction. We just want to make sure everything is done according to what is supposed to be done. And quite frankly, there's been a lot of corners cut as far as even putting that in. The next thing you know, you got squabbling over 3 siblings. We can't close the transaction because they have to work all those details out and have it in writing from a legal aspect, or we can't even fund the files.
Doug, I know that there's some paperwork that you always need in order to close on the property. We get calls from title companies all the time, and it's specific that it has to be within a certain number of days. I always forget how many days it has to be within, or what traditionally is wanted on that. But we're often asked for a certificate of trust, so that it proves who has the right to sign, who has the right to go into the closing and be the person that signs at the closing. My understanding is that most title companies won't accept such a document that is 3 years old or 2 years old, but they want a new document created, by the attorney or created to specify who is the who currently has that authority.
The rule of thumb is 2 years for our underwriters, or 2 years.
Is that right? That's great. So a lot of title companies we've seen actually ask for it within, I think 60 days or 90 days or something like that. A lot of them are really.
There could be a red flag. There could be a red flag, but if something has been done within 2 years, we will look at it. Now, again, we've seen some stuff where the signatures didn't quite line up with some things too. So there's some investigative work there, but yeah, we've seen that.
On the refinance deal, what we see a lot of times, and I know you're not a lender, but you kind of help with making sure that the title work is set for the lender and all of that. But what we see frequently is that the lender will not want to issue the mortgage to the house titled into the trust. And so what we often do, and this can sound silly, but what is mostly done is we actually take the house out of the trust. So we deed the house back to the owners, to the grantors. We get the mortgage, and the very next day we deed it right back into the house, which is perfectly legal, and that's what they request that we do.
That's required.
That's required. Yeah.
That's required by everyone. We have to pull it out of the trust, do the transaction, and then you turn around and put it right back into the trust. Exactly right.
There's a federal law, name escapes me right now, but there's a federal law that says that lenders, mortgage companies, can't object to us putting a mortgaged house into a trust. Basically, it doesn't hurt them any because the grantors, the creators of the trust, the owners of the trust, still are liable for it. The lien, the mortgage goes, with the land. And they're certainly still liable for it, so it doesn't create any issue for them. But most mortgages have something called a due-on sale clause, and so in theory they could say, hey, well, you transferred it to the trust, so now the entire mortgage is due. The federal law says, no, you can't do that. You can't invoke the due-on sale clause because you're putting a house into a trust. So it just makes it easier. But I think the mortgage companies generally would prefer to mortgage it with outside of a trust, but that doesn't mean the next day we can't put it right back in. Yep. Okay, what else here? So you may have some comments on this. It looks like we might have lost Tom for a second here. I'm sure he'll be back shortly here. Are you still there, Tom?
Absolutely.
Okay, we just lost your audio or your video. Great, I'm glad you're here. You may have some comments about this. I think you have enough experience in the industry, and I know you've worked with and helped so many families. And one of the things I like about Tom is that he's not just a transactional guy. He actually cares about the people that he works with. I think he goes the extra mile with the people that he works with and understands their situation. And one of the more difficult situations the families are in is when, especially the house was in the family for 50 years, or this is mom and dad's house and they've lived there for a long time. And then we get this issue of it's just not going to be feasible for mom and dad to live there anymore. And that either they decide or the doctor decides or somebody decides that it's time for them to get some help, and it's going to be too costly to get the help in their home, or they decide that it's appropriate to move into an independent living or assisted living or a nursing home. Some kind of healthcare crisis occurred, and then we decide that they're going to need, kind of people around them all the time so that they can get the care. So they move into assisted living, and then the big question that comes is, well, what do we do with this house? Because now it's empty. What do we do with it? I'm sure that you've experienced that, Tom, and I think we might have lost Tom now. Are you still there?
Oh, I'm still here.
Okay, great. My computer shows you gone, but I'm glad that you're still there. So I'm sure you've dealt with families like this, that they're just struggling with this issue. What do we do? Because mom and dad moved into independent living. We have this house. They have this emotional attachment to it. Give us some thoughts on that and any experience you have with that.
That's becoming, unfortunately, the norm, with what's going on today. I've done more of that type of transaction this year than the previous 10. The baby boomers, we're losing them. So the kids come along. Some of the kids know about, that their house is in a trust. Some don't. Some have no idea what to do. So that, again, the first step is to talk to them, reassure them that they've got somebody who will just give them advice, but will be there with them. No one wants to be left alone. Everybody wants to feel like they got somebody that's working for them, helping them, and that's what I do. I enjoy helping people. That's why I got into real estate. And this is some of the biggest things that people deal with is the sale of a home. And now this is even more so when you've got all the emotional attachment, as you indicated, the family home that's been in our family for 100 years. This is where I grew up. This is where we've had the party. So first thing to do is you let them, they have to make their own decision. Sometimes they want to act quick. They want to move quickly, and you anticipate that, and you get things ready for them. You make their life easy and make their decisions, help them make their decisions so that they can move quickly and move on. Some people, they need time. They don't want to be rushed. You give them all their options, and when the time's right on their timetable, they'll make the decision, and we'll move forward. The one thing I try to do, no matter what the situation is it's so imperative that they work. And I don't mean to be a broken record, but it's that important to work with a good attorney to handle this in either way. Even if it's an attorney that's created the trust, it's get back in touch with them. It's getting them back involved in the process to make sure everything runs smoothly, to make sure that all the wishes of the deceased people are met. Sometimes there's extra little things that are involved. And if they haven't got an attorney, which the last couple I've had have been ones that they didn't know if there was a probate, if there was a trust or not, then you not only bring in an attorney, like yourself, Robert, but I also bring in Doug. That's their specialties. My job is simply to market the property, is to help them with the transition of the property in and of itself. When it comes to the advice on how to do things, what paperwork to be filed, I work with you. And when it comes to the title aspect, once I get all my documents signed of me being hired, I get that over to the title company, and then they can start doing the due diligence and work with the law firm to make sure that this is a smooth transaction. The one other thing that we kind of pride ourselves on is not all real estate transactions are the same. Some of them have issues. And if we can address these issues in the beginning and get going on them, sometimes you need time to do a quiet title. Sometimes you've got to for probate, or if it has to go that route, there's time involved before you can sell property. So we want to make sure we're doing it in a timely fashion.
Yeah, we'll get back to that quiet title question or point in a second, because I've got some funny stories on that one. But I wanted to mention, I know that you have lots of people that you work with and that you can recommend, and that's really extremely helpful for a realtor to be able to do that, because, well, one thing, if somebody is moving into assisted living or independent living or nursing home or something like that, they really do, in addition to the real estate aspect of it, but they really should consult with elder law attorney, because the possibility exists, even if we're not looking for any kind of benefits to help pay for that care. All of that care can be so expensive. And even if today we feel we don't need to get any kind of help paying for that care through veterans benefits or Medicaid or any other programs that are out there, PACE waiver or anything like that, we may need that in the future. So sometimes people are, they're just kind of very focused on the now. They say, well, we've got enough money to pay for the assisted living for right now. And my point is, we don't know if that person that needs the care is going to be with us 6 years, 10 years, 15 years. And so if we haven't thought that through, the time to get the advice with regard to making sure that you're protecting yourselves and not hurting yourselves as it relates to qualifying for government benefits to help pay for these things is the time that you actually move in. When the earlier the better. So if you're moving into assisted living, independent living, certainly nursing home, we need to have you come in. We're going to get you advice on, well, this is what it looks like to get veterans benefits. This is what we can do to protect assets. This is what it looks like to get Medicaid, waiver, PACE, any of the other programs out there. And it's real important that you do that, because some of these programs have the most ridiculous of rules. And so it's important. So if in fact, someone was, moving out of their house and they got to decide what to do with their house, it is important to come in and get the advice on that. But there's other things like sometimes this is somewhat unexpected, or at least even if it wasn't unexpected, it was kind of procrastinated. In other words, the family didn't really want to have to deal with it. And then finally, when they deal with it, they realize that the house is in ill repair, or there was a hoarding situation, and they just got so much stuff in the house. I imagine that you have folks that you could help them, that you can refer them to say, okay, you don't have to clean every part of this house. You don't have to deal with the hoarding situation. You don't have to repair the kitchen floor that the cat destroyed. You have people that you can recommend to them to help them get through this process, right?
Oh, absolutely. The one thing we have is we've partnered up. We do a lot of business-to-business stuff. We work by referral only, first and foremost. So a lot of companies out there have different models of how they do their business model. I believe in referrals. So when we find a good cleaning company or a good auctioneer company, just like you, if anytime we have a law problem, a question, we go to you. We know where the pros are. We know that we're going to be taken care of and taken care of right, and given the right information. And that's a one-stop is kind of what we try to pride ourselves in, is to pay all the client's needs and to make sure that's taken care of. Light construction, handymen. A lot of times we go into these houses, it's not major work. To make a house more financeable, maybe it needs some updated electrical plugs, the GFIs. It's something small, simple, but that's the difference between going FHA or rural development, different loan programs that are governmental loans. That's sometimes the difference between being eligible and opening that up to all those buyers also, or just simply, hey, this house needs work. The only thing we can take is cash or conventional. So you're limiting limiting the pool of buyers you have. So we have all these folks that can come in, help Right now they're busy as heck with everything going on. Everybody's seems to be putting money back into their homes and getting them updated, which is wonderful. But you do have those people at hand, and heck, there's been a few times where I've had to grab a paintbrush myself.
There was, you mentioned earlier about antiques, and that's a really important one too, because a lot of people have some things that might be kind of valuable, and people are very nervous about that because they say, well, mom and dad always said this was valuable, or they didn't know it was valuable, but I think it is. And the question is, everybody gets nervous because they say, well, I don't know who to go to. Where do I get, information? Can I rely on somebody? Where do I go for a reliable source? And you have connections with folks that would be able to evaluate antiques and help sell them and things like that too, right?
Absolutely. We have, a lot of times they're called liquidators. It has a negative connotation to it. They're able to identify the ones that are worth more money, that are worth, and sometimes some of the stuff just isn't. There's also specific antique shows that come around. Celine has a big one, for an example, that I've had a lot of clients will go to and meet with some of the referrals that we have, and we'll sell that product there, and that's where you'll get a little bit more money. So we always have a vendor available, and if not, that's kind of the full service thing that we do, just like you, Bob. We look for those people. We do our homework, and we make sure we get the best people possible.
I want to mention. Oh, please.
I'm sorry. No, I was just saying on the transaction itself, when you're talking about this situation, which happens, it happens unfortunately frequently lately, and Tom's right, it seems to be happening lately. There's really two C's that we look at it when we're talking about these things. I think number one is you have to have an extra bucket of compassion when you're dealing with these transactions. So from a service standpoint, I'm talking strictly title from my side. I know from Tom's is yours as well, but from our side of it, this is about compassion. This is about people doing, this is a tough situation. They lived in a house for 30, 40, 50 years. They graduated from them. Compassion. The other C that's huge for this, and we take the extra time to do this because we're very sensitive to it, that's communication. They want to know every little bit of them. If you can keep them well informed throughout the process, it's huge. They love the extra few minutes that you can spend with them to walk them through the process, what's going through. This is a very emotional time, and it's very important you work with the right team who understands and is very sensitive to that, and as we certainly are on a regular basis. It's a tough situation, but we have to walk them through with compassion and sound communication.
Yeah, that's great, Doug. That's exactly, I believe that completely. I did want to mention one thing. Sometimes in this situation where mom and dad are moving out and they're just not ready to make that sale decision. And sometimes it's actually when we're looking at, if we were looking at Medicaid, which is something that we help folks with, and preserving assets and still qualifying for Medicaid, one of the things that people will ask is, well, isn't there some advantage of keeping the house? And potentially there is. Now, a lot of families will decide that the advantage is comes with too many negatives, including having to keep the house and pay the taxes and possibly having a vacant house. And so a lot of families will choose, knowing the law and having the options, they'll choose to sell the house, knowing that it's going to have some impact on how much money we can protect and how much assets we can protect. But it is something that comes up that people say, well, would we be better off if mom or dad need Medicaid? Would we be better off keeping the house? It's a case-by-case answer. Not every family is going to be a little bit different. And if we have a house that's worth $40,000 and we're paying $1,000 in real estate taxes every 6 months, and we have to pay for the upkeep, and we're going to have an empty house and things like that, and this could go on for years, it may not be appropriate. And there's times where it's even a more expensive house where it's just not appropriate. One of the things that does come up in that scenario where they're just not ready to sell the house is the possibility of renting the house. And my only 2 cents on this, actually it's worth more than 2 cents in this case, especially lawyers. Lawyers' advice is never, it may be worth 2 cents, but you're always going to pay more than 2 cents for it. But the idea is that you have to get legal advice. If you're going to rent the house and you think it's going to, and mom or dad going to be on Medicaid, you have to get legal advice because there's specific rules about renting the house and how you document it and what you do with the money and how you report it. So if you're going to rent the house while mom or dad is on Medicaid, you need to get good legal advice about what specifically you need to do for the renting of that house. So any other thoughts on renting a house? I know that's not really your wheelhouse, but you guys, I'm sure, deal with this from time to time.
Yeah, make sure you're doing that. Documents are right, because eviction process and everything else, because it can get really ugly. Because the owner now wants to sell 2 years from now, but they're renting it to somebody, then what they've got written in the document doesn't line up with what they're trying to do. And we've had several closings where the owners are now choose a year from now to sell it, but they've got somebody sitting in there and they have a lease or rent agreement that doesn't line up with what they're trying to do, and the transaction kind of goes away. You
guys might be able to talk about this too. Go ahead, Tom.
The other side of it is a lot of times when we look at the mortgage, what the monthly payment is, and working with you, we decide if the amount of money left over after paying the mortgage makes sense. The other side of it is, just like we touched on earlier, the emotional side of things is, do I want somebody that could ruin mom's house? I don't want to see it. I don't want to deal with it. Not to mention the 3 o'clock phone calls. Even if you hire a company, now they've got their hand in the cookie jar to take the money. So yes, from time to time we do rentals. A lot of times they rent to family members. The family will agree, hey, you know what? We don't have to sell right now. We'll let cousin Johnny or Susie rent the house while they're in college, whatnot, and then sell it. So if that is what happens, yes, we help them with the paperwork. We help facilitate that. But for the most part, sale has been, whether it's right away or whether it's a little bit down the road, typically always goes that route.
Yeah, that's
you
great.
can talk about this too. You can talk about this too, but sometimes you got to watch if there's a mortgage on it. You have to make sure that in the mortgage it doesn't say that they can't rent it or land contract it or whatever. There's been some language in certain lenders we found out they were renting it and they weren't even by their mortgage allowed to be renting it, and it becomes problems down the road.
Yeah.
There's one other major thing too, is that mom lived in a house or dad lived in a house or they lived in a house. They had their homestead on that piece of property, which gives you a discount. You get one discount on a house, and at homestead it's roughly 38% to 40% cheaper. Well, as soon as that happens and when the assessor finds out that mom and dad no longer are alive and no longer have that on there, that the taxes raise 30 to 40%. So there you have a slide for that too. So that definitely plays a role in how we handle things.
Yeah, no, good transition there, Tom. That's exactly where I wanted to go next. Before we do that real quick, a couple things that you said I wanted to point out. If we do rent to family, oddly enough, you still need legal advice because there's consequences of renting to family, especially if there's going to be Medicaid. And the reason I keep bringing up Medicaid is that the long-term care costs so much, and we have to at least look at that. Even if we don't want Medicaid, we have to be prepared for it. Is what if we run out of money? What if we get to the point where we want to protect some money, we want to protect some assets, and we want to qualify for Medicaid? You need to know there's a 5-year look back on that. So we need to prepare for that. You need to get advice, even if you're not ready to qualify for Medicaid at that time. So one other thing I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on before I go into, I want to talk about like uncapping of property and personal residence exemptions or the homestead that you just mentioned. But one other thing before we go into that, I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on land contracts. And I'll tell you up front, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of land contracts, only from my perspective. They mess up my planning often. They're much more difficult to deal with from an estate planning perspective. If you die and there's this land contract out there, continuing that, it's much more complicated from a Medicaid perspective, from a asset protection perspective. So I just wanted to throw that out there, telling folks that it does create a monkey wrench in some of the planning options, and I wanted to see what you guys had any thoughts or comments on land contracts. That's just my perspective. I'm not trying to discourage people. I just want to say it's something out there that you got to think through if there's consequences of it.
Well, I think from my standpoint, land contracts sometimes they're a necessity. There's certain municipalities that have multi-units. Sometimes I had a client that had a multi-unit house. It was in a local community, Mount Morris city of Mount Morris. They have a special zoning in that area to where even if it's under 4 units, it's still in light commercial. So that means any prospective buyer wouldn't be able to do a residential mortgage, even though it was only 4 units. They would have had to get a commercial loan. Not everybody qualifies for that. So sometimes those properties dictate that's unless it's cash, and some of these properties can't. Most people don't do cash. They'll do a land contract, a short one, 2 or 3 years with a buyout at the end. So from that standpoint, that's fine. But the market that we've been in for the last 6-7 years, we haven't had to do a lot of land contracts. The market's been very well. There's more buyers out there ready to spend money than there is housing to accommodate. From a title aspect, there are some things that we need to do right. Sometimes people can not record or go through a title company with a land contract. That's where they opt to go to the quitclaim deed, which we advise against. If you're going to do something like that, I always make sure that you're using a title company, and this is where I always count on Doug to make sure that not only is my client taken care of, but all parties included are taken care of. Doug?
Yeah, this is one of those ones, Bob. I'm with you on it, even though it does happen and there is reasons for it in the market. We do close them, no doubt about it, with the balloon at the end, whatever the case may be. But this is one of the places where these people like to cut corners. They found a document online, it sounded good. They keep calling my wife Ann, who does the processing, and says, could you figure out what my payment is? I'm sorry, no, that's not what we do. Or is this the right language? Or is it, no. This is one of the ones we want to push them to someone and say, if you're going to do a land contract, fine, but make sure it's done legally, it's drawn up right. Everything is done, because we get some really good ones. You would love it. I think sometimes, Bob, we get together, I'll show you some samples, but we get some good ones in. I mean, I don't know where they got them from, but we wish they'd never get them again.
Yeah.
Because they're rough. And so there's a lot of loose ends. There's not really legal. I'm sure if it ever went to court, it would never be any binding thing, because it's just so. So yes, they're going to happen periodically. The market's so strong right now, but there was a lot of people dinged up as far as their credit. So maybe this is an option for them for a couple of years to get their credit repaired, to get back to a situation. That's a lot of the cases too. But boy, get them done legally, get them done right. Make sure there's no loopholes in them, because there's some really ugly ones out there, Bob.
I'll tell you, one of my first real lawyer experiences, so it was after my first year of law school, and I volunteered at the local legal services, the legal aid in Oakland County there. And the lawyer came out and said, "You're a law student?" I was like, "Yeah." And they gave me this big stack. It was about this big. And they said, well, here's the problem. We've got this client that came to legal aid, and they were buying this house on land contract. They've paid it off. They went to go get the deed, because with the land contract, you don't get the deed until it's paid off. With the mortgage, you get the deed, at least in Michigan. In some states, this is different, but in Michigan, you get the deed subject to the mortgage. With the land contract, you don't get the deed. Well, what happened is, and you guys know exactly what I'm going to say, the seller died. So now what do we do? Because there's nobody to sign the deed. Well, the best answer, of course, if you do it right, you go ahead and, if you want to tell them, Doug, what we would do on that, to how do we deal with a deed, maybe a deed in escrow or something like that.
Yeah, well, it's going to court. But a lot of times in the paperwork and the mortgage, there is still a mortgage on it. This is part of the fraud that happened back in 2008, 2009. It wasn't just foreclosures, huge part of it. But a lot of them was, a lot of these people own houses, they land contract their houses, they let them go into default. Because sometimes in their mortgage, in the note itself, it will say that you cannot do it to a third party. They weren't even, according to their own mortgage, allowed to do a land contract, but they did it anyway. So what happens if they default?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of litigation going on, because they thought they had a land contract, but then they were still paying more. And,
what a mess.
There's a lot of it still going on.
What a mess. So talk a little bit about, and this is something that we always have to be really careful of. I've got an attorney in my office, one of the other attorneys in the office that has a lot of real estate law experience. And whenever there's a transaction, whether we're putting a house into a trust or taking a house out of a trust or anything that we're doing, I always run it by her and say, okay, what are the capping and uncapping consequences of this? And so to just explain to folks, capping is whether or not the local assessor can reassess the property and say that it's worth more. So when is the property uncapped? And then the other one, and this is really important, is the the personal residence exemption. You referenced it earlier, the homestead exemption or personal residence exemption, and just making sure that that you know what you're doing and that you're not facing and getting this big surprise that now you're going to get a much bigger bill than you thought you were going to get.
Well, when it comes to the uncapped, a lot of times mom and dad had a house. They never refinanced. They didn't do anything to where it would indicate for the assessor to take another look at it. It's been 20 years. Their tax rate still's real low. Everybody else around them, taxes are, 30, 40, 50% more. I personally bought a home. I bought a home. I'm the second owner of a home that was built in 1950. When the lady passed away, a company came in and renovated the home, pulled the permits, and when I bought it and closed on it, my tax base, I thought, hey, this is a great house, low tax rate. Knowing that I would get a bump in my taxes, but you never know, and that's something I should have did a little bit more due diligence on. I just assumed, I'll take care of it. It came back, it went from, $3,000 a year, almost up to $4,500 a year.
Yeah.
And just because of those permits being pulled. So getting with the assessor, finding out what the local stuff is compared to what it was is very important. As far as your principal residence, everybody gets one. Everybody gets a principal residence. So if I own my personal home here and I own a cabin up north, I don't get to get a discount on both. I get one, and it gives you a discount of usually between 38 and 40%. It's where your mail goes to. It's where your license goes to. It's where you're tied in from a voting this time of year, a voting experience, and that is where you're able to get that discount. A lot of people will weigh out both sides and see which one works. And that's not necessarily how it works either. I've seen people lose that. They'll qualify for it at first and then lose it later. It's where you physically live. And a lot of people try to play games where a wife will have it here, husband will. They will find out, and you will get a love note and a bill. Doug, anything on yours?
No, I think you hit it pretty good. That's right. I mean, obviously you got a summer and you got a winter bill, and it'll go through that. But they are going to check to make sure primary residence, and it's a big sticker shock when they find out, because a lot of people are maybe buying investment properties and they lose track of that stuff and they start to think it. The next thing you know, they get hit because they're going to get hit with a big bill because they do track that.
Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I wanted to cover one thing here of we do have the ability to, if a property is going to stay in the family, so let's say it's a cottage up north or farmland or whatever, and the property is going to stay in the family. There was a court case a few years ago that makes it so that if we document it right and we prepare the deed properly and the trust properly and the things like that, we can make it so that if it's going to pass on to family, that it doesn't uncap. In other words, they don't get to reassess it because of that transaction of having it go from mom to son or dad to daughter or whatever it is. So there's the court case out there, and so it's very easy to run afoul of that. If the deed's not written exactly right, or the deed into the trust or the deed out of the trust isn't written exactly right, it gets it's very precise. But there is a way now that we can pass it on to family. It has to be a specific family member, but pass it on to family. And if they're not going to sell it, it's going to stay in the family. That's going to make a difference, because then we can keep it capped and not uncap it under those circumstances. Well, so we're kind of running up to the end of the hour here. Savannah, are there any questions that we want to cover here?
We did have one question, and you may have covered this, but just in case,
Michael wants to know, how does selling mom or dad's house affect VA benefits?
Great question, actually. So it can be an issue. So here's the deal. And this, I'm going to tell you the bottom line, and I'm going to tell you why. The bottom line is, come to us before you sell it. If you're getting veterans benefits, you got to come to us before you sell it, because there's a way under the VA rules. And I tell people all the time, don't look for logic when we're talking about government rules. There is a rule that you can't give money away and qualify for veterans benefits. They'll penalize you for giving money away, but they don't have a rule against transfers related to exempt assets. Well, the house is an exempt asset. So there's a way that we can use trusts to protect the house where we can't do it with dollars. So if you sell the house and now we have dollars, you're going to get disqualified because potentially you're over asset now for that veterans benefit. And so what we need to do, you got to come in, we're going to put the house into trust, we're going to sell the house, the money from the sale of the house is going to go into an irrevocable trust. There's a whole process, and it's perfectly legal, and it makes zero sense, but that's the way the VA set up these rules. We saw recently with the politics and the presidential campaigns and things like that, about people paying taxes or paying less taxes, you know, and applying the rules in a way that benefits them, right? Well, this is, all government programs have a bunch of rules, and if you know them well enough, you can put yourself in a better position. And this is a perfect example of that. If you just sell the house for and you could lose your veterans benefits. But if you set things up properly before you sell the house, then I can protect the proceeds from the sale of the house. So great question. Anything else you guys want to cover before we kind of talk about? And if you want to kind of give your information and your phone numbers and how to get a hold of you, maybe a website or email address, we can kind of talk about how, if they have further questions, how they could get a hold of you.
Well, I'll start. The one thing I will say is that I would always start with you, Bob. Anybody that comes that has anything to do with mom or dad, including my mother, go to an attorney that you trust. Make sure that they've got everything prepared right. The last thing when I lost my father, he didn't do everything that he thought he did. So having the right person take care of things and putting them in place, so that way, when God forbid the time happens where you lose a loved one, you're not dealing with this stuff. You're not dealing with the financials. I mean, you have to do some of it. It's always nice that some things are already set up to where it goes on autopilot. So the first and foremost, and it's not because I'm on this webinar with you, I truly mean I would hire Mannor Law to take care of me. I couldn't say it any differently. As far as reaching out to me, they can get a hold of me two ways. They call my personal line at 810-691-6387 for a private consultation. The other thing you can do is go to my website at crowngroupmi.com.
Say it again.
crowngroupmi.com.
And I have gone ahead and put the link to that website in the chat for anyone who wants to click there.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just a vendor.
Yeah.
Copy, I'll send you back. I'll send you back.
You always have to go to somebody else practically. You're the sort of the necessary person that we say, nope, I'm not going to deal with you until you deal with the Doug first. You deal with the title company first. I say that all the time, even when we're doing estate planning. Sometimes people will come to me and they'll say, okay, I want all of the property behind the house to go to this son, and the property beside this tree to go to this other son. And I say, you know what? You got to go see a title company first. We got to divide up the property. Funny. We got to get new property tax IDs.
I say you got to go to the lawyer first.
I'll tell you what, I've had wills or trusts that I didn't write, but other people wrote, that says things like that says, you know, give the property behind the house to my son. And I say, I don't know how you're going to figure that one out, because you got zoning issues. You've got, you got to come up with a legal description. you got to get a separate property tax ID number, and there's no guarantee that the township or the locality is going to allow you to do all that stuff. So.
Right. Well, Doug O'Neill, we're First Title and Escrow. Our website is firsttitleservices.com. I can be reached at locally here at 810-931-3604. And I work very closely with Tom, and I hope to work more with you as we move forward.
All right, thanks,
Absolutely.
guys. I really appreciate your time. Savannah's going to wrap things up. We always end with allowing people, if they have questions for us, to schedule a quick 15-minute call, and Savannah's going to walk you through how to do that. If you want a 15-minute call, she'll give you the instructions here. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen. And thanks to all of you for attending. As Bob mentioned, we do have a really easy way for you to connect with our team. And I'm actually putting a link in the chat for you now. So what happens when you click this link, it's going to take you to Calendly. It's just a calendar, and you'll be able to choose a day and a time where a member of our team can give you a call. And we call these interview calls because you're going to be interviewing us to make sure that we're the right law firm for you, to make sure that you like us and that you like our process. And then we're also going to interview you. We're going to ask you a few important questions about your situation, your concerns, and make sure that we can actually help you, that we are the best law firm to help you. And the good news is that if we're not, we will refer you to someone who can. So I do encourage you to click that link. I just put it in the chat. You can also give us a call. If you don't want to schedule an appointment, you just want to talk to somebody today, you can do that too. Our phone number is 810-694-9000. I've also gone ahead and put that in the chat for you as well. And you should be getting an email. Actually, you've probably already gotten the email. And that email will also have a link that you can go to schedule that meeting. So again, I encourage you to click the link or give us a call or check your email. Also, stay tuned for tomorrow's email where you will have the replay of today's webinar, and be sure to share that with family, friends, or anyone who would benefit from hearing this information. Thanks again for everyone for joining today. Have a great day.